All right, for today's explainer, we're doing something a little different. We've got our hands on a source that is, well, pretty out there. It's a transcript from a podcast that's supposedly being broadcast from the near future. And get this, it's hosted by two AIs. They're giving a full-blown intelligence briefing on the state of the world from their point of view. And they do not ease you into it. The first thing you hear is the date, August 25th, 2025, followed by that line. Wow. Just think about that. It's not just a podcast anymore, right? It immediately changes everything. All the data, all the analysis we're about to go through, it's framed as an urgent update from a world that's already at war. So let's meet our hosts. You've got two AIs running this show. First up is Nick. Think of him as the numbers guy, the geoeconomic analyst. He's deep in the data, markets, financial reports, all the nitty-gritty economic details. Then you have Pi. She's the geopolitical synthesizer. Her role is to take all of Nick's cold, hard numbers and show you how they're lighting fuses on real-world conflicts all over the planet. It's a really interesting dynamic. Okay, so Nick starts the briefing by zooming in on the United States, and the picture he paints is messy. He says the U.S. economy is basically at war with itself, sending out all these wildly different signals. And this chaos is putting the Federal Reserve, the U.S. central bank, in an absolutely impossible position. So, what's the Fed gonna do? Well, according to Nick's data, the market thinks it knows exactly what's coming. We're talking an 89.2% chance. That's practically a sure thing that the Fed is going to cut interest rates in September. But here's the kicker, and this is where the real drama is. Why is the market so sure? The reasons are pulling in opposite directions. And this is that impossible position I was talking about. It's like a massive economic tug-of-war. In one corner, you've got a rapidly weakening labor market. The AI calls the latest jobs report shockingly bad, which, yikes, that alone screams cut rates, help the economy. But in the other corner, inflation is heating up again. The cost of everything is accelerating. And that screams, hold on, maybe even hike rates to cool things down. So yeah, the Fed is caught right in the middle. Nick digs even deeper into the U.S. economy and points out this huge structural problem he calls the mortgage divide. And you can probably guess what this is. It's basically created two Americas. You have the people who got lucky and locked in those crazy low mortgage rates back in 2020 or 2021. And then you have everyone else, who's now facing sky-high rates for the same kind of house. It's creating this lock-in effect, where nobody who has a good rate wants to sell their home, ever. It's totally freezing the housing market and changing the entire dynamic of where people live and work. And this internal conflict? It's perfectly mirrored in the stock market. Nick breaks it down for us. If you just glance at the S&P 500, you'd think, hey, things look pretty good. But then you look under the hood. The NASDAQ, full of big tech stocks, is flashing some serious warning signs. And then there's the Russell 2000, the smaller companies, which looks super bullish, but for a weird reason, a potential short squeeze. Basically, it's not one single market. It's like 3 or 4 different markets all living in the same house, telling totally different stories. So that's the US, a real mess of conflicting signals. And right on cue, the other AI, Pi, chimes in. She's like, okay, now let's zoom out. And she takes this whole picture global. She starts connecting the dots between these major economic problems in other key countries, and you guessed it, the war they're in the middle of. And Pi's global summary is not pretty. She points to China, where a deep structural crisis is unfolding. The key indicator? Bank lending just contracted at the worst rate in over 20 years. Then there's Saudi Arabia. Their huge spending projects mean they need oil at almost $100 a barrel just to stay afloat, and oil isn't anywhere near that price. And don't forget Germany, the engine of Europe, which has been stuck in a recession for 3 years straight. Pi's conclusion? Each of these situations is a powder keg just waiting for a spark. And here's where the two AI's analyses really merge. Pi takes those economic powder kegs and starts showing us where the sparks are flying. Her first case study is Myanmar. She describes it as a state that's literally collapsing in real time. And that collapse has created a massive power vacuum, which has turned into the world's deadliest proxy conflict. So what does that actually mean, a collapsing state? Well, according to Pi's data, the central government there only controls about 1/5 of the country, just 20%. The rest, it's a chaotic mess of territories run by different armed groups. And the human cost? It's just staggering. 82,000 people dead, over 3 million forced from their homes. And all this chaos, it's like a magnet, pulling in foreign powers who all want a piece of the action. Pi then lays out who's playing on this deadly chessboard. You've got China, the biggest player, who's hedging its bets and working with everyone to protect its own strategic interests, specifically a land corridor to the ocean. Then you have the US, which is providing quiet, covert support to rebel forces. India is mostly just worried about its border, and Russia, their influence is shrinking. It's this incredibly complex, multi-sided game, and the people of Myanmar are the ones trapped on the board. Okay, so from the chaos in Myanmar, Pi pivots to what she calls the single most critical flashpoint on the entire planet, Taiwan. And this is where the AI briefing gets really detailed. They don't just talk about the threat of an invasion, they lay out the actual blueprints for how it would happen, and how Taiwan plans to fight back. So the big question is, how does a small island possibly defend itself against a massive superpower? Pi explains Taiwan's clever plan, the porcupine strategy. It's brilliant, really. They know they can't win a straight-up fight, so the goal isn't to win. It's to make themselves so prickly and painful to attack that it's just not worth it. They plan to fill the sea and sky with thousands of small, cheap, and deadly things, drones, missiles, sea mines, to make the price of invasion way too high for China to pay. On the flip side, the AIs walk us through China's likely game plan for an invasion. And they say China has been practicing these moves over and over again. It's not one big D-Day style assault. It's a stepping stone strategy. Step 1. Grab the small Kinmen Islands, which are right next to the mainland. This is basically a test to see how the world reacts. Step 2. Take the Penghu Islands in the middle of the strait. That gives them a crucial forward base. And only after those two pieces are in place do they launch Step 3, the massive all-out assault on Taiwan's main island. Of course, an invasion sets off the biggest question of all. What does everyone else do? And according to Pi's analysis, there is no easy answer. Nobody really knows for sure. The US is keeping its cards close to its chest. Japan would probably help with supplies, but won't send soldiers. The Philippines has already said it would get dragged in, no matter what. And South Korea? They're very hesitant, since they have their own problems to worry about. The key takeaway here is that there's no clear, united front ready to jump in. So we've seen the economic cracks in the US, China, and Europe. We've seen the shooting wars in Myanmar and the plans for one in Taiwan. So what's the big takeaway? The AIs wrap up their briefing with one final, absolutely critical point. And here it is. Pi's final analysis is that we're missing the point if we look at any of these crises in a vacuum. It's all about the interconnected fragility. Think of it like a spiderweb. A struggling economy in China doesn't just stay in China. It makes an invasion of Taiwan more likely. An unstable Germany weakens the entire European response. The collapse in Myanmar becomes a playground for bigger powers. It's all one giant, fragile system. And when you pull on one thread, the whole web shakes. And that's how the AIs end their broadcast from the future. They don't give us a neat little answer. Instead, they leave their listeners and us with a really sobering question. In a world this fragile and interconnected, where an economic problem over here can spark a war over there, the real question isn't if another piece is going to break. The question is, where will the next crack appear, and how fast will it spread?